forward to your comments. Alexandra Samuel is the director of the Social and Interactive Media Center at Emily Carr University in Vancouver. She's the co-founder and principal of Social Signal, one of the world's most experienced social media agencies. Founded in 2005, Social Signal works with business, government, and nonprofits to build relationships, brand, and issue awareness through online conversation and community. Alexandra.
Thank you. It's interesting, to tackle this question of the role of think tanks and the impact of social media on the world we live in through the lens of policy change, as the question was framed. And I think that's often the starting point, right? When we are asking, well, what impact have think tanks had? Or really, how important is social media? What people are often asking is, show me the policy change, show me the law, show me the government policy, show me the government that works differently. And it really is a lens that we're comfortable with. It's the way think tanks in many cases have been set up to engage with the world. And yet I think if you look at what social media has actually shifted in the past several years, we're not talking about a long time, you'll see that the policy change filter hides more than it reveals about the impact of social media and more broadly social media culture. And that's because the most exciting activities that have happened online are much more spontaneous or self-directed groups of people, small organizations, who are trying not to effect policy, but in many cases to circumvent it. To live in a world where government is no longer the necessary enabler of community change, community growth, economic change. And just to give you a few examples of what I'm talking about, the most obvious one, I think, is copyright. So yes, it's true, the government is doing a consultation on copyright, and they're trying to use social media to engage with that. Well, the reason we need to think about copyright is because the world of the internet doesn't respect that policy anymore. The policy is broken. There's really no capacity for the government to enforce it. There's really no capacity for industry to work through those conventional policy mechanisms for the outcome it wants. And that's because people have self-organized on the internet to create an ever-expanding set of ways to share the content they want to access, regardless of what the prevailing law or prevailing policy environment is. And that's not just, to be clear, it is in fact fair to endow that with some political intent behind it, because whenever you see an effort to constrain that behavior, and the most notorious example was several years ago, the US court system was used to ban some code that was used to share content with people who use Linux machines, and the hacker community found a wide variety of ways to distribute the code, embedding it in songs, in pieces of art, in all sorts of protected forms of speech, specifically so that they wouldn't have to be subject to this policy. So just an attitude that, try and make your policy stick, but good luck with that. More recently and closer to home, we had the case of people tweeting and Facebooking election results in the face of the ban on sharing election news before the polls close. Well, a colleague of mine and I set up a website to track the extent of that activity, and our server literally couldn't keep up with the volume of it. That policy might as well not exist because it's not enforceable anymore, and internet users were explicitly making use of these tools not just to influence the policy, but to demonstrate that that policy was no longer relevant to them or to the way that they were going to live their lives. I should also be clear, I don't think this is always a positive development. Again, in the Canadian context, after the riots in Vancouver, we saw an effort for citizens to organize around the perceived shortcomings of law enforcement and to use social media to identify people who had participated in the riots. And that turned incredibly nasty, with all sorts of racist and bigoted comments being made about the folks whose pictures were being posted online. And in the ensuing debate, I heard one of the folks who set up one of those sites very explicitly say, well, hopefully government will take care of it, but just in case, this is a plan B. So that attitude, which is, social media is our plan B, the internet is our plan B, radically changes the context for those who still focus on policy change as the outcome of interest. Because it's not the outcome of interest for many, many people who live their lives online. And if it's not the outcome of interest, then we have to ask, what is the role of organizations like CIGI, of other think tanks, of government agencies themselves, that are set up to engage with political issues and to enable political change through this very narrow thing we call policy? And the question I would ask is, what are the opportunities that this new phenomenon of policy circumvention and all of the sort of self-organizing efforts of citizens to solve problems more directly for themselves, what's the contribution that think tanks can make to those activities? Because they still need thoughtful input, they still need research, they still need expertise. But we can't pretend that it's all about policy change, because in many cases, policy is really a thing of the past.